Good morning, everyone. Jim Laird live here from Largo, Florida. I was hoping to have a guest on this morning, but that kind of fell through at the last minute. So I've been scrambling to kind of get a topic and stuff. So what we got going on today, Dr. Stillman actually has 2 Monday master classes. I didn't have time to put the links in the description, but I will do that after this is over. One is at 1 o'clock. He's redoing the toxins and first responders videos since our internet went to hell on his last one. And then he's going to be then doing at 3. Well, what is the topic at 3? Off the top of my head. Let me see here. Let me look. Hidden topics is first responders. And then at 3 o'clock. He has another one at 3, and I can't remember the exact topic. So my apologies for that. So make sure you get on our email list, because this week we'll be wrapping up the final chapter of our weight loss course, and you'll be able to get in on that and check that out. You can just go over to Stillman Wellness and put in your email address. You'll be on the email list. Wednesday night, there'll be an email being sent out. It's going out in today's email too, but the link to that webinar, we do that every week. So just as a reward for you being on our email list. And of course, you can get into any of our coaching programs on Stillman Wellness if you want to go there and check it out. So can you maintain muscle mass as you age? And I'm going to kind of put my own little twist on this. And it's kind of one of my pet peeves, is that people will make these broad general statements, and you've got people, like Peter Attia, and it's just all about muscle mass. It's about muscle mass. And yeah, muscle mass is important, but I'm going to give my insights on, because I have a large sample size of people I trained for over 20 years. Okay. So the things that I see disappearing very quickly, much faster than muscle mass with especially in our modern world with people as they age, is one, balance and explosive power, the ability to move quickly, the ability to move in an agile way. And I see a lot of people, especially people that have been meatheads like myself for long periods of time, that don't move don't move well at all, because they've lifted, so much, so being able to flow, being able to move in relaxed ways, being able to be agile, I think that's just as important. And if you can do those things, you're going to maintain muscle mass. I don't think you have to have like excessive muscle reserves. Like most of the people that live to be over 100, if you would want to do that, I personally don't. But if you want to live to be over the age of 100, being a really big person definitely lowers your odds of that happening. You don't see big muscular people living to be super centenarians. They're generally not big people. They're generally a lot smaller in stature. Stature people tend to live a lot longer. You don't see your 7-foot NBA guys. You don't see your pro bodybuilders. You don't see guys like that living to the ripe old age. So the key is you want to have enough muscle, and you want to maintain muscle, because you obviously start losing it at a certain age, but you don't want to have what I would call excessive or super physiological amount of muscle. And then you also want to be able to have variability in the strategies that you're using. I worked with a guy a couple years ago that had been lifting his entire life, and he literally could not relax. Like when you walk, your pelvis rotates one way, your upper body rotates the other way. And that's why, guys that bodybuilder power lift, they walk like a fire hydrant, because they don't, when you're lifting really heavy things, you don't want to rotate. So they lose the ability to rotate through the thorax. And then, even myself, I don't walk as smooth as I probably would have if I hadn't have done all those years of lifting really heavy things, which is fine. And I still lift heavy things for me that my standard, but I incorporate some things to make sure that I move well, and that I shut that stuff off when I'm done, so I'm not constantly walking around like that. And so when you hear these general statements, people are like, well, I got to put as much muscle mass on as I can, but then they don't understand that, the compression strategies that come with really heavy lifting, can lead to, lack of blood flow into certain areas, a lot of joint replacements, a lot of things like that are due to compression strategies that people are stuck in. And a lot of that comes from just not moving every day in different ways, right? So I would say the most important thing is obviously you want to do something that adds some sort of resistance to enable you to keep bone mass and keep muscle mass and obviously keep your metabolism rolling. But the daily um movement, people that live to be a ripe old age are doing things like gardening. They walk a lot, they do lots of daily things constantly. It's not like they're not sitting on their couch and then going to a CrossFit 4 times a week to try and make up for it. So you want to have these things in your life that, and our modern world has kind of basically created this thing where we don't really have to do anything. Whereas, a couple years ago, 50, 60 years ago, you had to do manual labor as part of your life in order to feed yourself. So now, and it's great that they've emphasized strength training because, if you took like the average 80-year-old now and you compare them to the average 80-year-old when I was growing up, my memory of the average 80-year-olds, like my grandfather, who'd worked on a farm his entire life, who lived into his early like 90s, he was very active up until the day he died. Whereas today we've got a lot of people that are still alive at 90, but they're in a home and they're in a diaper. You didn't have as many people back then because, modern medicine has allowed us to keep people alive when they probably shouldn't be, right? Giving them different medications and things that are keeping them going. But they're just kind of existing. They're not, thriving, so to speak. So one of the best things we can do is do things like throwing medicine balls or, having people stand on one foot and, walking on balance beams, obviously not like 4 feet in the air, but, like balance beams on the floor, having people do cross connects, uh, having people, do things like juggling, standing on one foot, believe it or not. These are all things that work on dexterity, challenge the brain. So you need a wide variety. You just don't want to turn everyone into a powerlifter. Although powerlifting, if done properly, can be a good part of keeping people looking good and keeping people younger. I definitely did that with a large sample size of ladies in my gym, but we also just didn't powerlift. We also had off seasons and we also had different things in our warm ups, and it wasn't just let's get as strong as possible, right? Because there are consequences that come with that most people don't really, and most people don't really take it seriously enough to experience those consequences either. You got kind of got two camps. You got the camp where it's like they don't do enough, and then you got the camp that does too much, and then you're better off being somewhere in the middle where you're consistent over time. And most of the people that you see that have had great results, whether it's in performance or just overall health and well-being, they've worked at a decent level. They've challenged themselves consistently year after year after year after year after year, right? And a lot of people don't understand that if you're going to push performance, like you're going to play in the NFL, or if you're going to do like triathlons, or you're going to do things like some of the endurance sports have a little bit better outcome as far as like longevity than say the power, like the more of the the sports where you have to be bigger and more powerful. But when you're pushing the human body to the max edges of performance at a high level, that is not healthy. That's why, as people age, they have to retire because they can't handle the stress that they're putting their body under. So, if you are getting older, I would highly recommend adding balance into your training. I would highly recommend getting on the floor every day for 10 minutes and just moving around in different ways, getting quadruped, which is all fours, do knee circles, roll around on your back. If you can do, rolling to your right, rolling to your left, if you can do shoulder tuck rolls, backwards rolls, all these things on the ground, would be highly, highly beneficial to you along with some resistance training, of course. But also, like, I think there's much greater value if you get down on the floor and move around every day. You're not gonna lose as much muscle mass as somebody who just sits in their chair and reads an iPad all day, right? And that's why I've seen having grandkids, and all of a sudden their knees don't hurt as much or their back doesn't hurt as much, and they're like, what's going on here? And it's like, wow, you're down on the floor playing with your grandkids like 15-20 minutes several times a week, or they're starting to walk more, they're outside playing with the kids outside more. So a lot of these factors come down to, you know, just steady, consistent things over time, as opposed to like imposing like massive stressors, you know. So, and then if you are playing on the floor with your kids, or if you're, you know, playing pickleball at a decent level, or, you know, maybe you're running some 5-yard, like a 5-yard sprint, you know, 5-10 yard sprints, I think are great for older people, pushing sleds, things like that. So like, if you're doing that kind of stuff on a regular basis, and all of a sudden you're in a crosswalk and a car comes around the corner, you can like get after it and do it. But if all of a sudden you haven't like had to run in a short distance at maximum capacity since you were like 25 years old, and you're like 65 and you haven't done that, that's going to be a problem. So that's why it's important to have just low level stressors and low level activities. So if you do run into a situation where there is an emergency, your adrenaline's going to take over. But your ability to handle that and perform well during that is going to be much higher if you practice these things on a regular basis, you know. So I would really highly encourage you, as you age, even you're younger, get down on the floor, move around in different ways, do different things. You know, bear crawls like that are very unconventional in today's, you know, commercial gym type environment. Like when I'm doing bear crawls and arm bars and things like that, and like half get ups and things like that at the gym, when we go to the commercial gyms, people just look at me like I've lost my brain. You know, it's pretty funny to watch, because, you know, most people are just, you know, curls and shoulder lateral raises and you know, kind of sort of deadlifting, kind of sort of squatting. So, you know, most people are more concerned with the aesthetics of things, which is totally fine. I totally get it, as opposed to actually being able to move well. And if you move well, and if you can display some explosive power, the chances are you're going to maintain muscle mass a lot better than somebody who cannot display explosive power and does not move well. So there's just a few thoughts for you. So I am going to get on with my day, unless anyone has any quick questions. But make sure you tune into Dr. Stillman's Monday Masterclass. His masterclass is today. Let me look it up real quick at what the other one is. Oh yeah, that's a good one. Supplements everyone should take. That's at 3. That's going to be a popular one. So that is going to be very interesting to see what he has to say about that, because thank you, David. Let's see. My concern is getting injured or aggravating old injuries. Well, James, if you are smart about how you approach that, I would say you actually reduce your risk of getting injured if you're smart about how you do it. And that's where the position, I get into this in the fundamentals of wellness, that's where preparation, and that's where I will say, when you strength train, if you do have an injury when you're older, you tend to come back much faster if you continue to move, as opposed to not moving at all. Jim, is my concern is doing resistance exercises, getting injured or aggravating old injuries. One, it comes down to position. You got to understand that the exercises that are popular in bodybuilding and powerlifting only really care about hypertrophy and power and strength. Okay. And when you're demonstrating power and strength, you have to have less mobility and more compression. That's how you demonstrate maximum force. So the way you're going to set your exercises up is you're going to set it up in a way where you're not using a lot of compression. Now, you're not going to generate the amount of power that you would if you were trying to, lift heavy things. But for example, like if I'm going to have a client, do some sort of overhead press, I'm going to set them up in a either seated. You can do a seated landmine, on a bench. I've got a bar, and I'm here, and I'm pressing that bar like this. Okay, so the rib cage is in a good position. The shoulder girdle is moving in a way that is biomechanically efficient. Whereas most bodybuilders they're gonna sit and they're gonna arch and they're gonna create stability by compressing their spine, and they're gonna press like this with a straight bar. And that just puts a lot of stress on shoulders, elbows, all the things, because they're trying to lift the most amount of weight and build the most amount of build the most amount of muscle possible. We can change the exercise selection by using a landmine, which is a bar in the corner, and making it so it helps the joints move better, and changing the position, doing things like goblet squats off a box, so there's exercises that have a less probability of cause. You can get hurt doing anything. Like, the number one injury I see below back is people in the kitchen turning with a dish and then, tweaking themselves, right? I've seen that more than anything. Very few people actually get hurt lifting heavy things. A lot of people get hurt doing the same strategy over and over and over again, and they don't understand the position that their body is in. They don't understand that, when they're deadlifting with their head back and their back arched, they're using their spine to basically lift it instead of their whole body and their legs and their trunk and everything. So it's a matter of exercise selection, and that's why it's important to work with somebody who is smart about this stuff. And then you got to check their ego at the door. And that's why preparation of the body is so important. And if you go on YouTube, if you look at mini circuits, and if you go on my YouTube channel, I have a whole bunch of stuff about how, like, if your number one goal is to feel good and look good, like, you don't need to be deadlifting with a straight bar. You don't need to be squatting with a straight bar. You might not even just squat at all. Like, you can goblet squat. You can do variations of belt squat. There's so many different things you can do. You just don't need to do the traditional barbell exercises. So, and then using, when you dumbbell press, using more of a neutral grip as opposed to this grip, and then making sure you're not overly arching your back. I have some videos on that on my YouTube channel. Pressing without arching hard, and then same thing with like pull downs and things. You're not arching really hard with your back. You're staying stacked, so your shoulder blade can upperly rotate on your rib, or on your rib cage, right? Your scapula, so to speak, so that everything moves better. So if you take a little bit of a different approach as far as organizing your training and exercise selection, I'd say the risk of injury for not doing anything is much worse and much higher. Actually, one of the highest injury rates is in marathon runners, believe it or not. Much higher injury rate than the weight room. But there's definitely ways you can organize your training so that you greatly reduce and actually lower your risk of getting hurt. But that's where the mini circuit, if you look on my YouTube channel, there's mini circuits. I go through all sorts of different variations of exercises that help kind of put your body in a better position. And obviously, starting slow, you don't really need to do that much if you haven't done anything in a while. But you just want to keep it simple. You don't have to do that much. And then when you start doing a lot of isolation exercises, that's when you start getting into, people, inflaming elbows and things like that. So it just kind of depends. Richard asks, what kind of protein supplement should an older person take and how much? Well, I like getting my protein from real food. So like things like bone broth, grass-fed beef, things like that. as you age, you don't need quite as much protein as you did when you were younger. But I would be shooting for at least 0.6, 0.7 per gram of lean body weight. But that's going to depend and vary from person to person. But like, goat whey, most people handle well. Some of the whey proteins, just make sure you rotate your protein powders. That's basically how you want to handle that. But real food's always the best. I would be shooting for 20, 25, 30 grams of protein for the average dude at every meal. Making sure you're getting what you need so you can maintain muscle mass, maintain skin, all that stuff. And you're getting lots of, if you're eating lean proteins, you're going to get the good fat that you need. So, and James asks, are jumping jacks and jumping rope good for bone density? Do they stress the knees too much? Well, that all depends, James. So if you have someone who has the ability to absorb force with their ankle, their knee, and their hip in a good way, it's not a problem. If you have someone that doesn't have the ability to be elastic, and the thing is, the trick is the dose, right? So 10 jumping jacks is different than 300, and 10 seconds of jumping rope is different than 4 or 5, 10 minutes of jumping rope. And so if you haven't done those things in a while, are you qualified to do them? One. So, I mean, believe it or not, there's people that are not qualified to walk. I mean, I tell people to walk outside every day, but there's people with impingement in their hips and things that need to do other things before they are able to walk. Or, I'll have people that their gait is so messed up and there's just not a lot you can do about it. So we recommend things like recumbent bike and things like that, because the walking is actually hurting them more than it's helping them. And sometimes there's that are in situations where they can't really maintain, or they can't do anything to really help it. But, so they walk as much as they can. Obviously, you don't want to not walk at all, but there's people that actually can do a lot of damage by walking excessively. So these things are all very individualized. So if I do recommend, if you haven't done jumping jack, and yes, anything, if you have someone who's done nothing, no resistance training, nothing, and been very inactive, just if you have someone who's bedridden, just the act of walking is going to build bone density for them. If they've been in a bed, or, in a, say they're in a prison camp for 5 years and they've been, solitary confinement, these guys after World War II coming out of the Holocaust, just the act of getting up and walking and moving around and getting some nutrition over time, would build bone density. So a lot of it depends on who you are and where you're at, right? And so then there's a big difference between somebody like me, who has incredibly thick bone density because I've lifted some really, really heavy things over the years, right? And so it comes down to, I don't need to do that much to maintain what I have, because I've got this massive reserve of bone density that most people don't have the bone density that I have ever in their life, because they haven't stressed themselves in the way I have. So yes, jumping jacks, jump rope can be good for bone density. You just have to make sure you start at the right dose. And do you have the ability to absorb the force from that? And the key is like, like little kids doing all this stuff in phys ed, like this is going to be the problem, is you're going to have these kids. Like if you look at, there's been videos going around of like 1960s phys ed where these, where these high school kids are doing this phys ed, and this was just normal phys ed, and they're going through all these, people are looking at it like, wow, this is incredible. Well, that's the way it used to be. Like everybody did gymnastics. Even when I was at school in the 80s in Canada, we had everyone in class ran a mile, like everybody, like even and there wasn't that many unfit people, but we all had we had a thing called Canada Fitness, where everybody went out and did stuff, even if they sucked at it. You got kids today who have never done any of this stuff, right? And so a lot of us that are a little older, at least our bodies have a memory bank of doing these things while growing up. Kid today at 2 is handed a screen instead of them crawling around on the floor and amusing themselves that way. Instead of going out in the backyard at 5, they're inside on a screen, right? So what's going to happen when people have no foundation at all So my recommendation is when starting with anything, if you haven't done it in a while, start with less, start with just a little bit, and then more and add a little bit more. The biggest thing, awareness, people just have a really hard time knowing when to stop, right? And then most people just don't do a really good job of building a foundation, right? Like most people, when they've been eating like garbage, and instead of just saying, well, I'm going to remove some of the junk food gradually, and then I'm just going to add some protein in, I'm just going to gradually do this. They go from like eating potato chips and Taco Bell to doing, intermittent fasting or a 4-day water fast. There's no like, there's no process involved, right? So we want to, or people will be like, well, I haven't worked out in 6 months, so I'm going to go to Orange Theory, or I'm going to go to CrossFit. And then they get thrown into the meat grinder and they wonder why they get hurt, or they stop. There's no like, okay, I haven't done anything in like 10 years. I'm going to start with walking 3 times a day. Or if I can't walk, I'm going to ride a recumbent bike, 3 times a day for 10 minutes. And then I'm going to start. And that's why in the fundamentals of wellness, I'm slowly adding things, because most people, when they first start, a lot of the people in our coaching program are beginners. When they first start, they need to spend 5-10 minutes on the ground doing simple warm-up stuff and doing simple drills to get them ready to do the next level. Most people just jump right in. They don't do any kind of preparation. It's like track and field. Like if you look at track and field athletes, the majority of their time is spent doing really simple things: skipping, bounding, hopping on one foot, doing all these low-level activities to actually prepare them for that 100-meter sprint. It was really funny. I was listening to an interview by Usain Bolt the other day, and he was like, I trained for 6 years to run 4 seconds, or to run for 9 seconds, right? And he's like, these people that quit after 2 weeks because they didn't get results, or 3 weeks, they weren't seeing results fast enough. I trained for 6 years for 9 seconds. What kind of discipline does that take, and what kind of consistency does that take? But that's where most people go wrong. Most people will go from one extreme to the other. You want to start where you are. If I'm here in Tampa, I have to start in Tampa if I want to drive to Glacier National Park. I can't start in Kansas City. I can't start in Wyoming. I have to start here. I can't start in Fargo, North Dakota. I have to start in Tampa, right? And I have to get in the car and I have to drive. And most people, they don't want to do the low-level activity to prepare them for the next level. They want to jump right to something that's fancy, instant gratification. And unfortunately, that's kind of how our society is, and that's how things are marketed, especially in the weight loss and the fitness industry in general, is the quick 12-week success, and you can have great success in 12 weeks, especially, I see fundamentals. So, well, that's it for today. And you guys have yourself a great day. We'll be back here tomorrow. And thanks for jumping on here. Thanks for all the great questions. I really appreciate it. Have yourself a great day. Make sure you get outside.